one of the things that we've been seeing in the clients that we've been working with is that they frequently ask us, what are other companies doing? Who's really making movements and advancing in the space of leveraging artificial intelligence? What are the organizations doing? What kinds of benefits are they seeing? What kinds of trends are you seeing? And, obviously, as we continue to work with a lot of organizations, we have some internal interaction that we have, and just the experience we get with working with our clients to give us good information and good benchmarking to share with our clients. But last year, we decided that we wanted to do a more formal study around this. And so we embarked on working with working on a project to do a deeper study. And one piece of the study was research on some of how the largest companies in the world are investing in artificial intelligence, what they're doing to deploy AI at scale, and what kind of challenges they're having. And this was a bit of broad research. It involved looking at a lot of collateral knowledge that had been made publicly available in things like thought leadership, in presentations and conference materials, and the like. And then specifically, we actually interviewed 30 individual companies who consider themselves to be embarking on the AI journey in a very meaningful way, and were willing and interested in sharing their insights into what they're seeing from an AI perspective. And then, we did some secondary research as well. We looked at things like job postings on LinkedIn. We did a scan of all of the projects that we've done that are AI related, as well as a lot of published thought leadership in the area of AI, both from academic institutions as well as other private organizations. And what this really did was it gave us a 360-degree view into what's happening in the enterprise as it relates to adopting artificial intelligence. And we have, I would share with you verbally today that we have a over 100-page PowerPoint presentation deck that digs deep into the details of the study itself. But for your presentation today, I've boiled it down to 8 trends. And those 8 trends are really the things that we took away from the study that were the most meaningful in terms of what we saw that we think is most impactful for organizations, and what we think are going to be ongoing trends that enterprises will see. So, at a high level, we saw, a shift from experimentation into applied technology. So looking at getting out of the lab and really deploying AI at a larger scale. We saw the merge of different types of technologies together. So the value of AI really gets its full benefit when it's brought together in collaboration with other types of techniques and approaches. The need is growing and will continue to grow, and the amount of investment that organizations are making into AI is pretty significant. Organizational capabilities are critical, and evolving our organizational capabilities is becoming ever increasing. The next 2 trends, 5 and 6, are pretty closely tied together. One is the need for governance over AI, and the second is the need for control over AI. And I'll talk a little bit about the differences between the two and why each is important. Next is rise of as a service. So organizations want to not just build their own AI, but they want to consume it in an as a service model. And I'll talk about some of the trends we're seeing there. And then finally, the competitive landscape and how AI is really shifting the competitive landscape in the organizations that we talked with, and also the organizations that were a part of the broader study. So with that, I'm going to jump right into trend number 1, and we'll deep dive on each one of these. And this is actually a slide I'm going to come back to recap some of the insights. So I'll be back to this in a little bit. So the first is trend 1, which is the rapid shift from experimentation to applied technology. And what this is really about is that very early on in the AI journey, a lot of organizations started to invest very deeply into data science teams and into other teams that could start building the types of machine learning models and natural language processing models and the like that could be used for different types of business outcomes. But what we found was that for all the talent that had been acquired by organizations and for all the effort that was being put into doing a lot of this experimentation, there was really what I refer to as a failure to launch. And what I mean by that is great experimentation with great experimental outcomes. But a lot of these models and a lot of this technology that was being utilized to experiment with wasn't being scaled into production. It wasn't becoming part of BAU or business as usual processes. It wasn't embedded into the ongoing operational processes that we all live and breathe every day in our normal jobs. And it was really kind of getting stuck in the lab. It was having a failure to launch. And what we've seen is that in talking with the organizations, these 30 leading companies, as well as our research, what we found was that there is a rapid shift into more productional AI. And that comes off the backs of a lot of different things, but a few in particular. One is that the major cloud providers, Amazon, Google, Azure, Microsoft, are really building platforms in their cloud environments that are targeted at production AI and at the ability to scale AI, both through storage power, through compute power, as well as the different types of tools that are being embedded into their cloud platforms to enable production AI. So, simply put on that side, productionalizing these experiments and productionalizing AI is getting a little bit easier. The second is that these experiments aren't really proving to be valuable to the organization. They're not generating kinds of top line and bottom line benefits that organizations thought they would. And they're looking at them now and saying, well, out of these 10 experiments we did last year, we need to take a hard look at them and say, these two were really meaningful. And if we had these at scale, they could be really impactful. And they're making the movements now to do so. And then the third is scaling of resources. So very early on, everyone got really, really excited about data scientists. And I'm still excited about data scientists. I have 300 of them on my team. But what we weren't as excited about, or what you didn't hear a lot of hype about, was software engineering. Now, I don't need to talk to a company like Samsung about software engineering and how important that is. But the issue was that a lot of organizations were hiring data science teams without hiring equally talented engineering teams. And what happened is the data science teams build models to solve a problem at a point in time, and they don't necessarily have the skills or the desire to build the engineering capabilities that are necessary to deploy these at scale. So as they're building their models, they're not thinking about things like proper user exits and what happens if a file comes in empty. These types of normal basic foundational engineering principles aren't necessarily being considered in the data science experimentation process. And so, there was an article that came out a few years back, and it called "Data Scientist is the Sexiest Job of the 21st Century." And if you dig real far back into some presentations that I did back then, you'll find that I said data scientists are a sexy job, but the real sexy job and the job we should be talking about is software engineers. And it's for this purpose. It's for this purpose that if you don't have that connection between data science and engineering, then you have experiments for experiment's sake, and you can't scale it into full operational process. So this is trend number one. And we are seeing a big movement towards more and more AI becoming enterprise available and really available at scale, where it's over the past few years not been quite at scale. So the second trend is the convergence of automation technology with artificial intelligence, with analytics, with low-code platforms. So, going back a couple of years, a lot of organizations got really excited about RPA, or robotics process automation. And they were excited about having a mechanism to use technology to run the types of very rote or highly process-driven types of things in their operations that would remove a lot of burden from their employees. And what they found very quickly was that RPA is beneficial, and it can remove or automate some of the necessary processes and procedures that many organizations and roles face. But what they quickly found was that it's a 20% automation opportunity, or maybe a 30% automation opportunity. It's not a 70, 80, 90% automation opportunity. And the reason is for a few reasons, and it's a few things. And it's also one of the reasons we're seeing this convergence. So the first is that RPA is a great mechanism to automate very defined processes. What it is not is intelligent technology. It can't do things that are not very defined process driven. To do things that need a little bit more decisioning power, reasoning power, and go beyond, if then this kinds of statements, you need AI. And so a lot of organizations have started to realize that you can only go so far with RPA. You need AI to get to the more sophisticated kinds of automation. The second point here is analytics. So, automating a process is great. But if you can't learn anything from the process, if you can't improve the process over time, and if ultimately the outcomes, the outcomes and the insights that are coming out of those processes don't lead to better decisions, don't lead to improvements in operations, don't lead to top line, bottom line improvement, then why are you doing it? And so that the absence of analytics over these types of tools was something that was missing, and that we're seeing a convergence on today. And then finally is low code. So whether you're talking about RPA or you're talking about AI in the landscape of process automation, most processes today still can't be 100% automated, even through the combination of automation, RPA type of technology and AI. And there's always going to be exception processes. There's always going to be points of interjection where humans should be interacting with the machines, where humans should be interjecting different types of insights, guidance, sentiment, values, etc. And the low-code platforms that are emerging now and have been for some years are really providing the kind of third technology piece in this circle that helps us to route different types of exceptions, that helps us complete that human in the loop that's so important when we talk about AI. And when I talk about low-code platforms, I'm talking about things like Appian or a lot of Salesforce capabilities, things like Pega, new ones in the insurance space like Uncork. There's a lot of them that are out there. But these low-code platforms allow us to very easily configure business process, case management, workflow, exception handling, et cetera, dynamically within our organizations. And it's really helping to kind of bring more process automation to life, well and beyond what the initial thinking was from just an RPA perspective. So the third is enterprise growth. So one of the things that we saw in the study and that we asked specifically about to the 30 mature companies we talked to is how much are you investing in AI? So when we looked at these 30 companies, we brought a level of maturity. And in these 30 companies, we found 5 of them to be what we would consider very mature. And by very mature, I mean that they're using AI in multiple different functions, that they've got some AI they've scaled across the enterprise, and that they've got good use cases of where AI is being used in production and is being leveraged for decision-making, for larger process automation, et cetera. And what we found was there was a big gap between these 5 mature companies and the other 25 companies in the detailed interviews in terms of how much they've invested on a current basis in AI. So as an example, on average, the very mature companies we talked to had at least 350 people specifically dedicated to AI initiatives. In the other organizations we talked to, they had far lower numbers. In addition to that, in the very mature companies, they were spending upwards of $75 million apiece on an annual basis in AI initiatives, whereas the non-mature companies were spending far less. So there was a definite differentiation between how much was currently being spent and how much dedication was currently being focused in the state today. But what was consistent across all of these organizations was the differences that they were seeing between today and what they saw 3 years from now. So as an example, when we talk to these organizations and we ask them about their current footprint of RPA, the very mature organizations said the very mature organizations said that they had RPA at scale in at least one function and had plans to embark on RPA initiatives in multiple functions. In these non-mature companies, they were saying, we've got RPA, but it's not at scale at an enterprise level or across a major functional area. However, it will be within 3 years. And as a matter of fact, 85% of the companies that we talked to said within a 3-year period, they expect RPA to be rapidly deployed and in a 3-year period would see it at an enterprise scale and fully across multiple functional areas. We saw something similar on the AI side of the deployment, which was that in all the companies that we talked to, only about 15% of them said that they felt that they had AI at scale. And most of these were those top 5. And but all of the companies, 65% of the companies said within a 3-year period, they expect that they will have AI at scale in their enterprise and as major components of all of their functional areas. So the momentum today is, and the maturity that's being realized by these investments is really impressing upon the organizations that aren't as mature. And the organizations that are not as mature are recognizing that they need to significantly invest over the next few years in order to grow these capabilities, or simply put, they're going to fall behind. And I'll talk a little bit more about competitive advantage later. But the overwhelming takeaway from these organizations was that AI is growing rapidly and that it would be a significant part of their footprint in the coming years. Next is organizational capabilities. And we found some interesting things in this. So one of the things that we asked companies was, where does AI sit in your organization? And we really got a lot of different answers. About half of them said that the mandate and the ownership of AI in their organization sat in their CIO, under the purview of their CIO. About half of the other half of the organizations said that purview for AI sits with some other senior level business leader. So that could be the head of finance, that could be the head of marketing, it could be the CFO. But it was aligned to business versus aligned to the CIO. And that was really kind of interesting from our perspective to see that it was such an equal split between the two. And one of the questions I frequently get is, where is it more successful? And the simple answer is, it depends on the organization itself. So a lot of organizations benefit from having AI under the mandate of their CIO, and a number of organizations benefit from not having it there. And it really depends on the overall organic makeup of your organization and how you normally operate. Less technologically advanced organizations tend to do better with having AI owned by their business leaders. More technologically advanced organizations seem to benefit by having AI under the purview of their CIO. What became abundantly clear, though, was that in any organization where the organizational capabilities for AI were limited to just a technology, they were failing. And that the integration of the AI enabling technology with resources that could use the technology and with resources that were deeply ingrained and involved in training the systems and using the systems as a human were far more successful than others. And one of the things that we saw across all of these was an abundance of centers of excellence focused on AI. So in the organizations we talked to, 65% of them said they either already have an AI COE or have a COE that is in the process of being built. That's 65%. 34% additional organizations that we talked to said they expect to have a COE in process or stood up within the next 3 years. So if you combine those together, that's nearly 100%. It's nearly 100% of the organizations we talked to said that they either have, are building, or have plans to build a center of excellence focused on AI. And in these organizations, one of the things that we found was that those that were driving more value out of AI and seeing more success in AI had an organizational model that tied the technology directly to the business. And you'll sometimes hear this referred to as hub and spoke. So a COE that is in a hub and spoke model. That means that there's some type of center of excellence that is providing governance, that is providing standardization, that is providing assistance and guidance, but that the application of AI is as close to the business users as possible. Because AI built in a silo without the deep involvement of people is going to be AI that's going to fall short. And this was something that we saw very clear across the organizations we talked to, in those that were getting more value out of AI versus those that were not. Those that were getting a lot of value had those constructs in place, and those that were not getting value out of the AI as they expected very often didn't have that kind of connection in place. And on that point, one of the other trends that we saw was a broader need for better data literacy across the entire enterprise. So, it's great to have highly trained data scientists and very, very skilled software and data engineers, and even brilliant, RPA and low-code developers. I'm the first to say that these are fantastic skills, fantastic skill sets, fantastic resources. But if the broader organization itself, your finance organization, your HR organization, your supply chain organization, the workforce that makes the company run, if they don't have foundational data analytics and AI literacy to really understand at a high level what the applications do, how they work from a very business-focused language perspective, then the AI doesn't get adopted the way that it needs to, and it doesn't get trained the way that it needs to. So there's an overabundance of organizations embarking on larger digital literacy types of programs to up the digital literacy or digital fluency of their organizations as a whole. The next thing that we saw was the need for governance, and this ties closely with the next one, which is control. When we talk about governance, what we're talking about is, how is AI going to be used in your organization? How do you understand that where you're using AI is the best place to use AI? How do you know that you have a process and a charter in place that says, this is how we as an organization are taking our values as a company and using that as the template for how we will utilize AI. In many cases, organizations start embarking on AI because they see an opportunity, but they don't stop to say, is this an area we should use AI? Is this an area where we think we should play? And I have an internal example that I'd share. So, 6 years ago, when we started embarking on building our AI capability at KPMG, we built a charter that said, this is where we're going to focus building our AI capabilities. And we had maybe 10 or 12 areas that were going to be our immediate focus areas. But more importantly, we had a list of, we're not going to build AI capabilities in these areas. And one of those examples was the diagnosis of disease. So at this point in time, there was a lot of public awareness on some of the things that were happening with some technology organizations working with healthcare organizations in building AI to help doctors and clinicians look at how AI could help with the identification, diagnosis, and treatment of disease. And we very early on said, that's against that we're not an organization that should be doing this. While interesting and while, we certainly have AI capabilities that could be used there, the diagnosis of disease is something that's out of the realm of what we should be focusing on. We should leave this to the healthcare organizations and specifically aligned organizations that are embedded in the diagnosis of disease to focus on this. And this was part of what we call was our AI compass. And the AI compass is, where should we be using AI? Where should we not be using AI? And that's an example for us. But to give you another example, very recently, there's been chatter about legislation regarding the use of facial recognition. So there's been some fantastic advancements by a number of organizations, and Amazon's been one of the leading organizations in developing new ways to use facial recognition. And they've been very open by saying that they're selling their facial recognition enablement AI technology to governments that want to purchase it. And as a free American public company, they have the ability to do that. But what they've also said, and what a lot of technology organizations we talked to said, was if there's going to be legislation on the use of AI, we want it now, because we don't want to invest in building AI only to find out later that we can't use that AI because of specific legislative prohibitions. So facial recognition is one of those areas where there's some legislation currently going through our federal government, looking at a charter for how facial recognition software should be used in the U.S. And it could dictate how this kind of software is used by companies as well as by state, local, and federal governments. And so, this legislation is an area of where governance is going to be brought upon us. And so as we consider the way that we want to use AI and how we don't want to use AI, leveraging back to these different legislations and emerging legislations is something that we're going to have to continue to have in an evolving governance program around AI. There's also some widely recognized guidelines on the appropriate use of AI. So if you look at the OECD or the World Economic Forum, they've published guidelines on responsible use of AI. And a lot of the organizations I work with will take those guidelines in concert with their own strategic plans and their own enterprise values and use these three things as the way that they build their AI compass. And ultimately, these things come together to dictate how are we going to govern the way that we use AI and the way that we want to scale it. And leading into that is controlling AI. And when we talk about controlling AI, what we're really talking about is, how do I trust my AI? I say all the time, that I've never met anybody working in AI that wants to build Skynet, right? For the Terminator fans out there. We don't want to build Skynet. What we do want to do is build things that make us a more productive society, that give us the ability to spend more time being creative and working together and interacting together, even if it's virtual like this, and remove a lot of the soul-crushing work that nobody wants to do. That's great, but how do I trust it? And how do I get to a place where I believe that the AI that I'm using has been built appropriately, that it's giving me insights and actions that I can trust and use in decisions that I make. And so when we talk about AI, this is where we're talking about, is your AI transparent? So one of the areas that we've seen taking off in really the last year, but exponentially more in the last 8 weeks, is the need for organizations to have chatbot or virtual assistant type of capabilities, conversational AI capabilities, in their customer service channels and in their internal internal service channels. And one of the things that I say is, table stakes in transparency with conversational agents is you need to know that you're talking to a machine. And when you look at things like what Google put out with Duplex, which is really cool functionality, that specifically is designed to have a computer sound more like a human, to sound more like the way that we speak. And that's great because it gives a level of comfort in communicating with the AI. But it doesn't remove the fact that me as a customer or as anyone interacting in any situation where I'm not seeing you face to face, I want to know that I'm talking to a machine and I'm not talking to a real person. And so one of the things that we say is necessary in transparency around your AI is you always need to know that the AI is there. Whether it's a financial forecast being generated off of machine learning and needing to know that there's some details of this model that were machine learning led, or talking to a conversational agent and knowing and being made aware that you're talking to a machine, these types of transparencies are the types of things that need to be built into our AI so that we know about it. Another area of controlling AI that we hear a lot about is explainability and bias. There's been some very public examples of bias, and facial recognition is a great one. There was a great MIT researcher, Joy Buolamwini, that came out a few years ago with a very impactful and well-known TED Talk, where she talked about her training, her utilizing facial recognition software and finding that the AI was very good at identifying specific white male faces, but her female African American face couldn't be identified better than a white mask. And this really exposed the need for understanding where we have bias in our algorithms, knowing how to avoid it, knowing how to test for it, and then go back and validate that we're making the right steps to avoid bias as much as possible. And so that's another angle of control that we talk about. And what controlling AI really gets down to is, how do I build AI in a way that I believe it can be trusted and that the users or those that are receiving the outcomes from AI believe that they can trust it. The next is as a service. And when we talk about as a service, we're talking about a few different things. So one angle of this is as a service from a technology perspective. So, I'll go back to those very mature companies. Those very mature companies that I talked about are really focused on having technology in-house that they use. And these are very large organizations that want to have their own AI in-house. Even if they're leveraging cloud, they still want to own it. They want their own data science teams. They want to build their own discrete types of solutions, et cetera. But when we get outside of those very large and very mature organizations, there's a lot of other organizations that say, I don't necessarily want to spend all of that money building a fully capable data science team, a fully capable AI engineering team, and a fully capable technology stack that does everything that I need it to do to solve all of the AI problems across my enterprise. And so the as a service model does a few things. One is increasing the use of microservices so that I don't need to build the algorithm the first time. I can consume that algorithm from a trusted source like a Microsoft or a Google. And I can consume that algorithm and utilize their API as a microservice in my models. That's one. Another example is in the resource model. So, a lot of what my team does is complement the resource teams of enterprises where they have a 20 data scientist and engineer job, and they only have 5. And so we come in and team with them to build different types of AI models and production scale systems that can help them reach their objectives on an AI landscape. And then you've got the technology itself. So when we think about cloud, when we think about using consumption and storage in a cloud capability perspective, more and more we're seeing more and more workloads, more and more compute power generated from cloud environments than on-prem environments, because the cost and the maintenance and the resourcing around these on-prem systems is just starting to become untenable. And being able to consume it in an as-a-service model via cloud providers is becoming more and more attractive to organizations that want to use AI. The last trend here is the shift in landscape. And I don't have this slide available here right now, but I have a slide that I sometimes show to organizations that looks at the top 15 companies in the Fortune 100 5 years ago, or maybe it's 10 years ago, and the top 15 organizations in the Fortune 100 today. and there's only two that are on both lists. And what is very easy to see very quickly is that those organizations that are technology and data driven, those organizations that are increasing their use of analytics, AI, automation, and low code are the ones that are climbing that list and that are able to maintain that level and stature in their overall revenue and ranking. And that's something that we're seeing every year repeat is that where organizations are using AI, they're able to compete and have a competitive advantage. And what we're also seeing is this shift towards those organizations that lack AI capability are quickly falling behind. And AI capability can mean a lot of things. It can mean having a better supply chain. It can be, using AI and machine learning into predicting supply chain better, into understanding, being able to detect anomalies in your supply chain, in leveraging things like, supercomputer-driven heuristic optimization into your supply chain, right? That's one angle. Another angle is customer service channels, and being able to have recommender systems and agent assist technology in your customer centers that give your agents a boosted type of intelligence because the AI is giving them information they need to better serve customers. It can also be something as simple as boosting the forecasting of your financials in terms of using exogenous data and third-party data and advanced algorithms to make better predictions in your forecasting from a financial perspective. It can touch a lot of different pieces of the organization, but what's clear is that the organizations that are not investing in AI in at least some of the major functions of their business are quickly falling behind, and those that are investing in a big way are starting to move ahead.